Today we're talking about Knob Creek 18 Batch 3. How is it? Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Bourbon Retriever, and today we're talking about probably my favorite release from Jim Beam every year, and it is the Knob Creek 18. The bottle is coming in at 100 proof. That was what the last two batches were at also, and it has an age statement of 18 years. There may be stuff older in there with it, but at least the youngest in there is 18 years. Now, across the Knob Creek vertical, they have the 18. The 15 came out a couple years ago, but they haven't re-released that lately. They also have the Knob Creek 12, the Knob Creek 9, which is the shelfer, and then their store picks, which are traditionally around 9 years. Some can be older, but those have a higher proof to them. They're about 120. Now the price tag on it is not cheap. This is coming in at around $180. That is a significant increase from the 9-year. You know, the 9-year shelfer is like 35 bucks. Even if you get the store picks, you're looking at like $50. The 12, I want to say, is like roughly around 60. So going from the 12 to the 18, you're paying almost 3 times X, and you're only getting 6 more years. But let's go ahead and jump in and see how this one is. Hey, on the aroma, cheers. So I know this is going to sound very stereotypical of bourbon, but the prominent note I get in this is a nice, rich, deep caramel note. Traditionally, bourbon, you're going to get the vanillas, the caramel, oak if it's an older one, but for me right now, the caramel is that prominent note you get on this bottle. And then there is that little bit of underlying vanilla underneath that caramel, and then with it being 18, yeah, there is a little bit of oak on it, but it is not overwhelming. Yeah, I think that's jumping out to me most on this bottle is how sweet it is. For an 18-year-old product, I was expecting much more of that oak note, maybe almost more tannic-y. A lot of times when you get these older age products, it can just turn super bitter how much oak flavoring there is in it from just sitting in that barrel so long. But on the aroma for right now, this is super sweet, and I probably wouldn't guess 18. But yeah, on the aroma, I'm really enjoying it. Let's go ahead and jump in and see how it tastes. Okay, on the palate, that sweetness is 100% coming through. It's almost like you had a toffee candy. You put it in your tongue and just let it melt and dissolve. It has a nice, rich flavoring that I am really enjoying, but there's just a ton of sweetness to it. The oak comes in on the back end of the palate. It does turn almost slightly tannic. You can definitely tell that there is some aged notes to there. That's probably my biggest critique on this is the tannicness on the back end with this bottle, but let's go ahead and jump in for a second sip. On the tip of the palate, when you first start, you get that nice vanilla, more of a light sweetness. I wouldn't say honey. Honey is typically, to me, a younger product, but there's that nice vanilla spice to the beginning of it. Then it transfers into that toffee note, that nice, strong toffee with a little bit of caramel coating around that toffee. And then after that, it turns into the oak note is what I'm getting next. Kind of on the side of the tongues. It's not a tongue, I have only one tongue. But on the side, I'm getting that oak, a little bit turning tannic towards the end there. Back at the end is where you get that spice a little bit, but nothing too crazy on the spice front. It is only 100 proof, so you're not expecting anything too crazy on that. Yeah, I'm really not enjoying that finish. That tannicness just really takes over for me on this bottle. So it is kind of ruining it a little bit just because it is that tannicness on the back end. The front mid palate, amazing, but that back end of the palate is just not relieving a desirable taste, in my opinion. No one's really talked about the Knob Creek 18 this year. I guess it kind of makes sense. You know, this is the 3rd edition of it. People have kind of already known about it from batch 1 and 2. And the big new shiny thing this year from Jim Beam is their Bookers. They've released just a ton of Bookers this year. They have the normal Bookers, they got the Little Book, they had the Little Book Infinity, they had the new Reserve Bookers that came out, along with the Old Granddad, Older Age Granddad that came out. I didn't chase the Bookers or the Old Granddad that much because I don't like the underlying products from those. They're typically more lighter. They don't have the viscosity I normally like in a whiskey. They're more peanut forward, and so it just didn't really make sense for me to jump up and pay for the premium product. For you guys out there, I would highly recommend you go out, buy a Knob Creek 9, buy, if you can find one of the regular Booker's bottles, and try those, and same thing with Old Grandad, try that. And if you like the underlying product, then that's when it makes sense to go up the vertical and pay that more premium dollar for the higher end bottle. So given that I just wasn't a big Booker's fan, it just didn't make sense for me, but I am a huge Knob Creek fan. I like the 9, I like the 12, so I was very excited to try this 18. And I have to give a special thanks to Brian, a great friend of the channel. These came through my area, and I didn't get one, and he was gracious enough to let me borrow the bottle to give a review today, and I could not do this value, so thank you, Brian. So last year I did buy batch 2, so we're going to do a little side by side to see how does batch 3 compare to batch 2. Is it getting better or worse? And maybe if you bought batch 2 last year, should you chase batch 3? Is it much different or the same? So let's go and jump into that. All right, cheers. So batch 2 has the similar sweet notes that batch 3 had, but batch 2 is almost more of like a cola note sweetness, and I am enjoying the aroma on batch 2 more because I enjoy those notes a little more. Yeah, and batch 2 is also just more pungent. I don't know if that's because the bottle's been open longer. I said that same thing about batch 2 versus batch 1. I thought batch 2 was better because I had more pungent notes. But yeah, I don't know how long batch 3 has been open, but right now batch 2 is just much more stronger in the aromas, and leaning more towards that cola note is just more preferable to me right now. But let's go ahead and jump into the palate. First impressions, batch 2 does not have any of those tannic notes. So just right off the bat, batch 2 to me is better because the tannic note to me is a drawback. Batch 1 had some of those tannic notes, so if you had batch 1, maybe batch 1 and 3 are very similar on that front, but to me right now batch 2 is coming out ahead because to me it's just a better blending of those older age products to not get that over oak note. One of the drawbacks I will say though for batch 2 is it doesn't have quite the lingering finish that batch 3 has. I would actually take that over batch 3 because I don't like the finish that's on batch 3, but if you're going to do a critique for batch 2, it's just there is no finish. Another thing about batch 2 is it doesn't have that toffee note that I was getting on batch 3. Batch 2 is just much more caramel. It's so much more simpler than batch 3. I would definitely say batch 2 is more complex. There's a lot more flavors going on, but I enjoy that caramelness that is there in batch 2. It is a simpler pour. I'm enjoying batch 2 more because it just doesn't have the negativities of the batch 3 barrel to me, or the batch 3. But I don't know if it's necessarily drinking LE level, just because the notes I'm getting are so simple. But the blending they did on this is really good because the oak notes that are coming through are more like a well-aged oak. It is what I would want in a bourbon that is aged. You get those oak notes there, but it's a nice balance with the sweetness and just not overpowering, which is really hard to do as a blender. When you have those ultra aged barrels, it can be very hard to balance it out. So I have to give respect on that front. So yeah, overall batch 2 I think is better than batch 3. I like that cola note, Dr. Pepper note that I'm getting in batch 2, that sweetness. But overall it's just a simple pour, whereas batch 3 has more flavors going on, especially that toffee note that is just punching right through. And then contradicting that with the oak on the back end. But to me, it's just the oak is a little too prominent there, and I wish it was tamed down a little more. But overall, should you go out and try and buy the latest release, the batch 3 from Knob Creek, the 18 year? And I would say no, it's not worth the money for what you're getting out of this bottle. Instead, I think you guys should go out there and see if you can find the Knob Creek 12. This for $60 is a much better value, and you're getting 95% of the way there. A lot of the same flavor notes for a fraction of the cost. Alternatively, you cannot find the 12, see if you can find a store pick. These are also around $60, but you're getting more proof to them. It's going up to 120. And if you're lucky, you can find an older aged one. This one's 11 years, but those are much harder to find lately. But even if you find a 9-year one for $60, I think this is a great product and everyone should at least try and buy once. If you're enjoying this content, hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any content going forward. I got a couple of great videos coming out here, a bunch of reviews of different LE bottles, some list videos as we come into the end of the year. You're not going to want to miss it. But if you're also enjoying this content, make sure you check out this video or this one before you leave. And until next time, cheers.